Driving our Sierra into the shop today. I smell something burning, got those black oil stains on the driveway. I'm suspecting an oil leak. It's got 165,000 miles. Disturbing? Not really. Actually, it's quite common. Join us today on Tech Garage as we find out why our Sierra is smoking in all the wrong places. Welcome to Tech Garage, presented by Advance Auto Parts. Now we got our 2007 GMC Sierra in the shop, and by all looks of it, it's in excellent condition. The key is 160,000 miles. Now Brian, anything, no matter how good it looks, with 160,000 miles are gonna have some engine issues, and mine's basically smelling some burning, and I got those drips on the driveway. What'd you find?
Yeah, there's some clues there. You know, as simple as a leak sounds to repair, there's a right and a wrong way to go about doing that, which is what we're doing today. You always want to work from the top down. And so obviously if we've got a leak, it's coming from a fluid. It's got to be probably a petroleum-based fluid if you're smelling it. So I've gone to all the reservoirs, to the, the coolant reservoir, to the brakes, to the power steering fluid. No obvious leaks anywhere at any of those points of contact. But I did find a leak right down here in the middle of the driver's side valve cover. You can see it on the exhaust manifold.
Yep, you sure can.
Where it's dark. That's probably what you're smelling. You mentioned black oil stain, black type of stain on your driveway, and a smell. That typically is oil. So I think I'm going to dive into this side.
Go ahead and get started with the valve cover, and I'll set up the engine demo.
All right, I'll do it. So I've got the cover off here, and I got to get this valve cover off. But to do that, we've got 4 ignition coil packs, and of course the spark plug wires. So you'll notice that we're working on the driver's side. Here's the alternator, and so of course there's the hot leg coming from the battery. When I pull that cover up, no way I want that cover to touch it and arc, create any kind of spark. So we've got the battery disconnected and safely out of the loop. So with the ignition coil packs, just 10mm bolts, couldn't be easier. I like to label everything, masking tape and a Sharpie. So far this cost you nothing. It's just good organization, so when we put it back together, firing orders right, everything's running well. And I'm going to jump into that. So the first thing is I like to pull the spark plug wires off. These can be brittle, these can be a pain. We'll get this first one. Well, happens to the best of us. The first one broke already. I'm guessing others just might. Very brittle, the plug pulled right out, so I think this is going to be a candidate to go ahead and replace the wires. I've tried to recrimp these. It typically doesn't work very well. So let me get all this going while John explains all the other ways you can find leaks.
Now there's several methods when it comes to checking for oil leaks or leak detection for any fluid for that matter. But before you do any of that, you want to clean the surface really, really well. We got some Purple Power right here in a bottle. Spray it down, make sure it's really, really clean. And then the gunk here, the engine degreaser, that works great. Just spray it on there. And like Brian said, run it through a heat cycle. Let it go ahead and dry everything off, and then kind of check for the oil leak as it starts to actually seep through some of the components. Now, methods to do it with. I like to use the actual dye, but you can go down to the convenience store. You can get some of this foot powder or any kind of spray powder. I actually got this out of Brian Gregory's wardrobe trailer. It works really, really good. I just spray it around the engine there. Let it run, check for the wet spot. Really simple, but this one here, now this is the cream of the crop. This is UV dye detection, and what you can do is you can put this in any fluid, and this is cool because it mixes in a little bit right here, and it goes in there and it mixes with the oil, coolant, power steering fluid, anything. You can drive the car for a while, and then you can come back and you can use these UV glasses, and you can use this black light, and you can check it and see what it looks like. Well, as a matter of fact, I can go ahead and show you a little bit. I'm gonna take a little bit out right here, put it on this white surface, and if I shoot it with this light right here, it's going to show up really bright, and that's great because you can check it and you can see where it's coming from. But don't forget, work from the top down. Clean the engine. Oil flows downhill. So Brian was checking the valve cover. We don't know or we don't suspect that there's any other leaks, but we're going to have to work the way down once we seal that up. Well, he found the valve cover, so we went ahead to Proform, and we got these nice upgraded valve covers, which are really, really nice. But the key here is this Felpro gasket. I'm going to flip this over, and I'm going to show you it's super nice because it's got the little tabs, and we can just run it around here and put it in the valve cover. And what makes it so unique is that it's actually running down in the track. There's little tabs, and a lot of problem people have is once they put the valve cover in, You go to flip it over to put it in, the gasket falls out. Maybe it's not seating right. So it's real important to get a good feel for that as you put it in there and you're making sure it's not popping out. But this one's nice because you can see I got it seated in there real nice along with the Proform actual valve cover. I can flip this over, shake it, nothing's going to happen. That thing's staying in there and it's going to do a really nice job sealing up the engine.
We did find the issue on the valve cover, and you can see this gasket where it was kind of pinched. Now, interestingly enough, John, this gasket doesn't look that old. Somebody's had this off recently, and I think on the reinstall, they actually pinched it and crimped it here, which is pretty common.
Well, I'll tell you what, yeah, exactly. If that Felpro I got here, that's going to solve the problem. And Brian, to top it off, I got you these gorgeous Proform valve covers here.
Yeah, I love it.
They're going to move the coils up a little bit so we can actually see them. Dress the engine up as you're doing it, but check this out. That's the Felpro gasket, man.
Yeah.
That thing's not coming out of there.
Love it.
When you put it on, just make sure you feel that it's not clunking, it's not rattling. It should just be a thunk, a solid feel. You should feel the gasket in there. It's really an art form, but once you feel it's solid, put it down. Torque specifications are key. Well, we'll get our truck all dressed up with new coils, new spark plug wires. Man, we're just going to deck this thing out. Here's the valve cover.
Thanks.
Stick around. We'll be back with more Tech Garage right after this break.
Tech Garage, presented by Advance Auto Parts, is being brought to you by GRI Engineering and Development, manufacturers of CarQuest Wherever Platinum Professional Brake Pads. Dustless Blasting, it's the future of surface preparation. Custom Auto Sound, the originator of classic car OEM fit radios since 1977. And by Advance Auto Parts, let's get you back on the road.
Well, welcome back to Tech Garage, presented by Advance Auto Parts. We're about halfway there. The project's coming along very nicely. Getting the final torque spec here on the new valve cover. It looks fantastic. I got to tell you, not much to the project. We just kind of have to go in order. We work from the inside out, from the center out. But before we put that new valve cover in place, we had to clean the deck. Now, a lot of today's heads and valve covers are aluminum, so you got to really take care of those surfaces. Resist the temptation to use sandpaper or a cookie or a wire brush because you actually may damage that aluminum deck, and then it doesn't matter how good your new gasket is, it's still going to leak. So we just used some brake clean, worked it around with a rag, got it good and clean, no fragments down in the valve train, so I feel really good about that. Remember that good high-tech Felpro gasket? It stayed right in place, it went right down on, and it was an obvious fit. I'm telling you, you can feel it when it's askew, it's not quite right. You can also feel it when it goes on right. That went very well. So it calls for 18 foot-pounds of torque. We worked from the center out on our 4 mounting bolts. I feel really good about the torque spec. And the next step was then to use the Proform bracket to relocate the ignition coil packs. We took our time, transferred everything over. I labeled those wires, remember that. And we've got our new spark plug wires in place as well. Now everything's snug, but not tight because we want those to reside, kind of settle in where they want to be. Proform recommends that you upgrade to the GM 8.1 plug wires. They're a little bit longer than these factory guys. So let's get this final ignition coil pack in. There's the gel, get the clip, just 2 mounting bolts. Proform really couldn't have made this much easier. You get the bracket in place, get it up off that new valve cover. I love the fact we're protecting the paint. I love how it looks, but I really like the fact that we're moving the ignition coil packs up and away from that exhaust manifold heat. So really well engineered system. I'll snug those down in a minute. Little dielectric gel on our new plug wires for contact, moisture protection. Here's another thing I love. We went ahead and got the new AC Delco Iridium plugs. They're going to throw a lot of fire, which we're always looking for power. We're all about firepower. So we've got them in, and I'm going to go ahead and get this guy seated right in here. There's a good connection. Now, I'm going to let that settle down. I'll come back and tighten up all of these ignition coil packs, torque everything down. We'll move on to the other side, and I'll tell you what, this thing's going to run like a beast. But I feel really good about the ignition upgrades we made and the maintenance we've done because ignition is critically important. John's got more on that.
The ignition is an important part of the system, Brian. And if you're old as I am, you remember the old distributor ignition system. Well, sit tight. A little later, we'll look at coil on plug, but let's take a look at this one first. Really broken down into 2 different sections. You got the primary section, which is all the small wires, your 12-volt wires going up, and then the secondary section, all the big wires coming over here, firing the high voltage. Could be firing anywhere up to about 50, 60,000 volts. How it works? Well, it's real simple. On a distributor, it's located right here, and I can turn it on and show it to you. If I flick it on, you got a little rotor inside of here. It's spinning around. You got some pickups that are actually developing a spark that's actually delivering it through the cap, and it goes through the cap and it comes over here and it fires at the spark plug. Now what Brian put on is the coils. Now that's an integral part because that's going to step up transformer, which steps up to 12 volts all the way up to, like I said, 30, 40, 50,000 volts and delivers it to the spark plugs. Now the spark plugs, he said he put iridium in that truck. Now that's pretty cool because down here you can see they come in all shapes and sizes. You have long threads, you have short threads, you have fatter diameters depending on what you're doing. You got platinum, you got iridium, and you got some insulators in there which determines hot ranges or cold ranges of the spark plugs. Just look in your service manual and pick the one that your car calls for. When you pull them out, it's a good idea to read them. How do you read spark plugs? Well, take a look at this graphic right here. You can see on the top left-hand side, that's a normal spark plug, and we'll just go across the top. Carbon fouling, too much oil in there. Overheating is going to start to eat up that electrode. Pre-ignition, that means it's firing too early. It's going to actually burn up that whole electrode. Oil fouling, your rings could be leaking. Mechanical damage, something got in there. And then over there you see the torch seat or the broken insulator. Just look at them when you pull them out, mark them, and then you can determine what's going on with the cylinder. Now you can also look at the firing pattern. A lot of technicians will do this, and this is some old school technology too, but we have our oscilloscope here from UEI, and this is pretty cool because I can fire it up and I can actually show you what's going on here. And you can see you had an actual fire line right here. That's the spark plug firing, and then there's a burn time, and it goes around and it happens over and over again. Well, if you look at that, you can determine through the different spark plugs what's going on. And take a look at this graphic here as well. It actually shows you a good firing line. The spark plug fires, you got a burn time, your coil oscillations, it goes through, and then what happens? The points close. When the points close or the actual coil collapses, you got that dwell time to where it goes around and fires the spark plug once again. Now that's a good look at a distributor system, but if you're my age, you may have your son sitting right next to you. We'll look at coil on plug next because that's part of our project, RSX Resurrection. We're going to put some high performance coils on that, and we'll be pulling that in right after break. We'll be back with more Tech Garage right after this. Welcome back to Tech Garage presented by Advance Auto Parts. Well, we got our beautifully painted RSX Resurrection car back in for an upgrade ignition system. You saw earlier on the training board I had a distributor ignition system. Brian was working on a distributorless coil on plug similar to this one. Now our friends at Console Lab, they sent the exact same ignition system on this one, which is distributorless, and it's a coil on plug system. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to reach down here and I'm going to fire up the power just like we were firing up an engine. This is the engine driving the crankshaft. So what's going on is you have a whole package over here. You have the actual coil, you actually have the spark plug wire and the spark plug all right here in one unit. So where's the distributor? It's gone. It's distributorless, coil on plug, everything built into one unit. How does it work? Well, instead of having some pickups in the distributor, it simply uses a computer. You have what's called a cam and a crank position sensor. Up here, the motor is driving the crank position sensor, and then the belt comes down and drives the cam position sensor. And here's a good tip for you. When your car quits, a lot of times you got to determine if it's a cam or crank position sensor. Not every time, but a good tip is I can go down here and I can actually unplug the cam position sensor, and what happens, it's not in play anymore, and the car is still sparking. Well, why is it still sparking? Well, it goes into backup. The computer takes over, and he can handle it with the crank position sensor itself. But if I come over and I plug that in, and I unplug the crank position sensor, well, see, now he doesn't even know where to start. So if I fire it up, we have no spark at all. So I would chase the crank position sensor first if I was doing any diagnostics. Now we took one of our coils and we actually cut it open, so you can see right here the primary windings and the secondary windings. Low voltage, points open, computer opens, induces a voltage into the secondary, giving us that big spark. Now the nice part about the Excel coils, you got some specialized steel in here which is keeping them wrapped up real nice, delivering that hard spark along with the high silicone temperature here and that OE connector. Now we're getting that on our RSX. Let's check in and see how it's coming along.
Ignition firepower upgrades, one of my absolute favorite projects. Now, if you think about the total equation here on our RSX, we replaced the injectors, we put a cold air intake on, so we're flowing more fuel, we're flowing more air, and now we'll be flowing more fire. Here's what 3 of the new coil packs look like from Excel. Now, couldn't be an easier project to do. You got 4 10mm bolts, 4 connectors, got that one loose. There's the old coil pack. John showed you how that worked. And again, here's what Excel sent us, the classic yellow. The good news is you can get these in blue and black these days, but we love that classic yellow look. But before I put this on, I'm going to go ahead and replace the spark plug, which I've done over here as well. We're upgrading here to the NGK Iridium. That is a beastie plug. We're going to be throwing a lot of fire into those cylinders, which we love. We're going to get better throttle response, we're going to get better fuel economy, and ultimately the icing on the cake of the power equation we've worked so hard to establish. Now here's a tip for you. In these distributorless systems, when you've got that whole tube, ignition tube going down in there, it's typically a long throw down in. Take a little bit of dielectric gel, put it in your socket, and that's going to create lubrication so that plug won't get stuck or hung up in the socket. That way you're not fighting it to get it out. So I've got a little dielectric gel in the socket. There we go. Old plug is loose, and now I can just work it up out and not worry about everything getting stuck down in there. Just makes it go a little faster, a little more efficient, not hard to do. And if you put that dielectric gel in your socket, it helps you on the install. That plug is going to seat up in there very nicely. Again, you don't want to cross thread this going down in. You also want to do this when the engine is not hot because you don't want to have any warpage anywhere around that spark plug mounting hole. Going right down in. We'll get it reseated here. And we are on our way. And I'm using dielectric gel everywhere, every electrical point of contact. There we go. Now, the new coil pack, a little bit of dielectric gel here. Again, moisture insulator. I just like to have that for additional insurance down in there. Only goes in one way. I'm gonna get it down so far. Got gel on my connector. Seat that, listen for the click. And we just gotta remount this thing, we're ready to go. Now, this is going to be one awesome distributorless ignition system on our RSX, but if you're making something like 4,000 horsepower like they do down at Burnyzz, you need a lot more than this. John's on the road now to show us how all that works. So stay with us on Tech Garage, presented by Advance Auto Parts.
Tech Garage, presented by Advance Auto Parts, is being brought to you by GRI Engineering and Development, manufacturers of CarQuest Wherever Platinum Professional Brake Pads. Evapor-Rust, super safe rust remover. Clamp Tight, the clamp making tool. And by Advance Auto Parts, let's get you back on the road.
Welcome back to Tech Garage, presented by Advance Auto Parts. Well, today's performance playbook's all about ignition systems, and when you're feeding 4,000 horsepower, you need a lot of spark. Josh, what about this ignition system? Tell me about it.
We run twin synchronized MSD magnetos, gear driven, and 2 spark plugs per cylinder.
Why 2 spark plugs?
Just to make sure that the nitro actually ignites.
Yeah, we talked earlier in the show, there's a lot of fuel going in there, and it's easy to wash out those plugs. I think the big question, why 2? Why 2 distributors? Why 2 magnetos?
Just to ensure the fail-safe of each firing per cylinder.
So one of them is feeding the one spark plug in the cylinder, and the other one's feeding the other spark plug in that same cylinder.
That is correct.
Wow, that's pretty cool. What kind of spark plugs you run?
NGK.
NGK. And you change them every single run?
Every single warm-up and every single pass.
Tell me a little bit about the wires. They look like they're pretty heavy insulated.
These are 8.5, and we essentially run the Leahy system, so we can change the timing 30 times in 5 seconds. That's
perfect. Yeah, you're not going to have any issues going down the track. Now, speaking of changing timing, when you do some high performance, you're going to have to mess with the timing, and John's going to explain all about it.
Normally this car would come with a 350 motor. It would use a distributor, old school style. But since we converted it over to an LS, it's a coil on wire setup. The computer basically controls your ignition, your curves, your spark tables. When you're tuning, you actually get a full-on table, and you can edit versus load and temperature of the vehicle with your RPM and set your spark table up the way you want it. Spark is power. Fuel is power. You've got 3 different things. You got bang, blow, and spark. That's all it works out to be. Every engine's different. Some engines want more timing and less fuel, and some are vice versa. On a normal car, the computer controls it. There's really no need to upgrade the spark. The computer will demand as much as it can and put out as much as it wants. You can beef it up with a Plantronic system. You can take the points out of the system and put a electronic system in it that looks completely seamless. It all goes under the cap.
That's the lowdown from Burnyzz. Now it's time for the email question of the week.
John, Robbie from Thomaston, Georgia emailed this week. He's got an 05 King Ranch F-150 with a 5.4 Triton in it. He says it's bucking and surging, but only when he's going up a hill, and he thinks it's a transmission issue. What are your thoughts?
Well, it could be, but I would check a misfire first. This is real famous, and the key words, Robbie, is going up a hill. See, you're putting an extreme load on the engine when you're going up the hill, and you're actually putting more combustion pressure in the chamber, and with that pressure, you may extinguish the flame. So we looked at the spark plugs earlier. Check them first, all the conditions of the spark plugs, and you can even check the spark plug wires. That's a simple test.
Right, you could have a cracked boot, a cracked wire, spark could be jumping, all that's problematic, and you're going to feel some kind of misfire, especially under load.
Yep.
Well, these wires have to have a certain amount of resistance in them, John. So let's just check one for a demo here. I'm going to roll it down to resistance. Let's see what we got.
Yeah, see this one showing about 5,000 ohms of resistance. Check your service manual. They differ wire to wire. 10,000 per foot's about an industry standard. Once that's good, could be a transmission shutter as well.
Could be, and they're famous for that. And so this shutter product makes a huge difference.
It does. You can go down to Advanced, get that, drain the transmission, put it in, and you should be good to go.
One thing I'm excited about is the firepower we put in the RSX today with those Excel coils. Awesome.
Yeah, not only does it look good, now it's going to spark really good. We got the fuel air going in there, the big spark bang. That thing's running like a top.
Love it. Well, come see us on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter.
Hey, thanks for watching Tech Garage, where we get you back on the road.
Production assistance for Tech Garage is provided by Chipola College, located in Marianna, Florida. Founded in 1947, Chipola was recently ranked as one of the top 3 community colleges in the United States.